Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Dear fellow warriors for the Lord, engaged in battle against our enemy and our adversary, Satan. Have you been watching what's been happening to police officers lately? Someone issues a call and they respond to that call. They show up on the scene and a crowd forms, and all of a sudden they start mocking those people that are called to bring peace and order to our community. They throw water on them, they throw milk on them, and then maybe even toss the containers at them. See that? We live in different times. That just wouldn't have happened just a short time ago. And it's important, don't you think, that when those police officers go out on a call that they don't forget. It's important that they don't forget that they are really at war. They're at war for the hearts and minds of the people of this country. They are in a battle, maybe even a physical battle. It's important that they remember that so that they're not lulled into sleep. Ready, because they might at any moment be assaulted. I think it's important for us to remember that too. Because just like those police officers, we're at war. We're in danger of being assaulted by something far worse than a bucket of water. Far worse than even bullets that can pierce flesh. We are in danger of being assaulted by Satan himself, who wants to not just take down our earthly lives, but take down our souls forever. It's so easy for us to go through life and forget that we are in that war, don't you think? Distracted by all kinds of other things. It's so easy to be lulled to sleep thinking that we're really not in all that much danger at all. And so the Apostle Paul writes to us, just as he did to the Ephesians. And he reminds us that we are at war with someone who wants to destroy us completely and drag us down into hell. An enemy who is committed to the destruction of your soul. And so he gives us some things to keep in mind. Put on that armor of God. Put it on regularly so that you're always prepared. But before even doing that, you have to know your enemy. You have to understand his tactics. And so he comes to us today and he says, take your stand against the devil's schemes. You know, if Satan came up to us looking like Satan, looking every bit like the enemy he is, and if he was absolutely honest with his intentions, then none of us would buy his lies. But he doesn't do that. He works in schemes. He walks around in the shadows. He shifts around and slides around, hoping that nobody notices. And the first thing he wants us to think about is that it's nothing more than business as usual for us. We're really not in that much danger at all. He doesn't want us to think that we're in a battle. He wants us to think that we're just fine. And then he attacks, little by little. I read an article about the greatest danger facing the church today. And according to the author, the greatest danger facing the church today is that people who came to church every single Sunday start coming to church only 3 times a month. And if people came to church every other Sunday, well, now they're starting to come to church just 12 times a year. And those people that came to church on Christmas and Easter now choose between the two, and they just come to one. Does that sound like the greatest danger facing the church today? It sounds like just a little thing. And yet it's huge. Because the devil knows that if he could take us away from the one thing that gives us strength, the one thing that bolsters us in this battle against Satan, then he's got us. If he can get us to think, I don't really need that one more assurance of my forgiveness. I don't need that little bit of strength one more time. I'm not really in a battle. I'll pick it up later if I need it. I can stop training. I can stop preparing because I'm not right now in the middle of a war. Then he's got us. He cannot defeat the Word. The battle against Christ has already been won. He knows that. But he knows that if he can get you to lay down your strength, he knows that if he can get you to surrender, then he's got you. And so he comes to us in his scheme. And he says, studying the Word, that's something you do if you have time. Worship is something that you do if you have room in your schedule. I'm already equipped to go against Satan. After all, it's just my sinful nature that I'm fighting against. It's just a little bit of materialism. It's just a little bit of this and just a little bit of that. I can handle that. Well, hell is full of people who said I can handle that. Paul says our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. You're facing an enemy that is out of your league. You're facing an enemy that is far more powerful than you. He's a fallen angel who went to get to battle against Jesus and lost, but nevertheless is absolutely committed to dragging your soul down into hell. Every day is a struggle in that battle against that fallen angel. It's hand-to-hand combat, up close and up front, personal. And so what we need is something outside of ourselves against that enemy that is beyond us. We need to be battle ready. We need to be armed, Paul says. Put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. The full armor of God starts with the belt of truth. It's funny, we live in a world that says there is no such thing as absolute truth. What's true for you is just fine. That's your truth. As long as you don't walk over my truth and what's true for me. But the idea that there is one God, that's kind of bigoted, don't you think? The idea that there's only one way to salvation, that's pretty divisive. And so we need to, instead of strapping on the belt of our own truth, strap on the belt of the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus Christ, who says, I am the only way to the Father in heaven, the only way to defeat your enemy, the devil, the only way to life and salvation. Don't strap on your own belt of truth. Instead, trap his truth around your waist. The breastplate in Jesus' day was something that protected vital organs. And so God comes to us and he tells us to to wrap around us the breastplate of righteousness. Funny thing though, that Satan comes to us and he tries to convince us that we can determine what kind of righteousness. And many times we choose our own righteousness. It gives us a sense of security to think about our own obedience and our own following of God's commands. I'm protected because of who I am and what I've done, but it's really like the old Kevlar vest. You've heard of those? Bulletproof vest? When Kevlar vests first came out, they could stop a bullet. But what they found out is when someone used a knife, it would push the fibers of the Kevlar aside and it would go right through that Kevlar vest. That's what the breastplate of our own righteousness is like. It's like that old Kevlar. And Satan knows exactly the blade he needs to use to penetrate the breastplate of your own righteousness. He uses your own acts of rebellion, your own offenses against God, and he slays you with them. That's why it's so important for us to have the breastplate of Christ's righteousness, formed and fashioned by every act of obedience. That's why it's so important for us to remember that not only does he provide that righteousness for us, he also bled for us, so that we would not have to bleed. He died for us so that we would not have to die. Wrap the breastplate of Christ's righteousness around you, and you will be safe for certain. Martin Luther once wrote, "If you wish to be strong and invincible, let the Lord Christ be your strength. Take hold of him and exercise yourself in him, that he is well known to you, and preserve his word in its purity. Learn it diligently, use it daily, and impress upon your mind and soul with such intensity that God's word and your heart by and by become one and the same thing, so that you may be sure in your confidence more certain than of your own life. If you've done that, then you are really strong and firm and will remain unconquered and secure." So putting on the full armor of Christ means impressing God's word upon us so that God's will and our desires are in fact one and the same. What that means is being in God's word can't be a once-in-a-while thing. It can't be a hobby I do if I have time. It's got to be a day-in, day-out thing so that we're ready for battle at every moment. But look at the blessing that comes to us when we do that. Paul says, when you put on the full armor of God, your feet will be fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. That makes me wonder. If I didn't go into the ministry, but instead went into the military and became a soldier, what would have happened to me when the bullets start flying after I was trained, but now set down into battle? Would I have been that guy that curled up in a ball and just wished that I could go home, started crying and sobbing, or would I have been a guy where the training just kicked in and I went about my business, calmly, coolly, and collected? Paul says when we put on that full armor of God, we are in fact ready for service. We are trained, we are prepared. We are at peace with our God, and that peace gives us strength. And so he says, in addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil ones. When Roman soldiers would fight, they would have in their left hand their shield. And it would cover the left side of their body. But then the other side of the shield would cover the right side of the soldier standing next to them. I think that's kind of important, don't you? As we put on the full armor of God, to remember that we are united in an army of Christians, and that we are in fact dependent upon one another. We can come here each week and week out and be strengthened, encouraged by one another. And remember, when we have the shield in our left hand, our right hand is free to go on the offensive with the sword of the Spirit, dividing those unbelievers, cutting them with the law and exposing their sin, and then using that sword as a scalpel as well, to bring about healing through the power of the gospel. You have the full armor of God with the shield in your left hand and the sword in your right. God's calling on you today. He's calling on you to remember that you are in fact at war. He's calling on you to be prepared and ready at any moment for battle, and yet at the same time, he's also assuring you that you've been equipped. You've been equipped with the armor of God, the word of his truth. And ultimately, in addition to being armed, you have the outcome already determined. Christ has won the victory. The victory is yours and shared through faith. That kind of commitment, that everyday commitment, can be kind of a scary thing, don't you think? And that's why I want you to remember also the helmet that's on your head. It's not a helmet of possibility. It's not a helmet of assistance that may come in handy. It's not a possibility of a strategy that may end up in victory. It's a helmet of salvation. Salvation that's yours because it's been secured by Christ himself through his life and through his death. Fit on your head through faith in his resurrection. Salvation is yours. Know your enemy. Know that he's coming after you. Know the victory's already been won, and it already belongs to you by faith. So continue to fight, knowing that it all ends up in heaven for you. Amen.